1.
You are going to hear a conversation between a student and an academic advisor.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4.
Hello there, you must be Jane. Please come in. My name is Mrs. Dunstan.
Hello, Mrs. Dunstan. Pleased to meet you.
All right now, let's see. Now, you're interested in attending university in Canada, is that right?
Yes, and I have a lot of questions to ask you.
Okay, but before I begin to answer your questions, I need to ask you a few questions first. Now, your major is...
Engineering. Mechanical engineering.
Right, and where did you graduate?
I graduated from the Beijing Institute of Machinery in July 1998. I completed my bachelor's degree.
Okay, now, I'm assuming you'll want to continue studying in that field, am I right?
Actually, I'd prefer to do an MBA if possible. But if I have no other choice, then I'll continue in mechanical engineering.
Okay, now, are you familiar with the requirements for an MBA degree?
Yes.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
I think I need to do well on the GMAT, and I'll definitely need the TOEFL or IELTS, right?
That's right. You'll need at least 600 on the TOEFL or 6.5 on IELTS. In addition, you need to have completed a bachelor's degree too. Did you take the GMAT yet?
No, but I plan to take it in August.
The requirements for a master's degree in engineering are a little different. You'll need to take the GRE and of course the TOEFL or IELTS.
I see. And when do I start to apply?
The best time to start the application process is in November or December of the year prior to your intended year of study. Application forms are usually available in September or October.
Which schools in Canada offer the MBA degree?
Of the approximately 50 universities in Canada, 20 offer an MBA. Here's a small booklet summarising Canadian university programmes. You'll find all the information on page 22.
Great. Thanks. And how about tuition and scholarships?
Tuition for MBA programmes has been steadily increasing. Some universities now charge the full tuition, meaning that there is no government subsidy. Those universities cost about $10,000 per year, and it's a 2-year programme. Other universities are still government subsidised, so the tuition is only about $4,500 per year. In terms of scholarships, usually the top 5 students entering the MBA programme are given a generous scholarship. All other students have to pay the full fees. International students have to pay the full tuition, that's $10,000 per year.
Oh, is it very difficult to get into an MBA programme?
Yes, in fact, the competition is very strong. MBA graduates have a pretty easy time finding a job, so many students are eager to do the programme thinking it will guarantee them success in their careers.
Well, it sure does sound like an excellent way to start a promising future. What is the school year like?
Classes begin in September each year and finish before Christmas. They resume after New Year and finish at the end of April.
And after April?
Why, that's your summer holiday.
Sounds great. I want to thank you, Mrs. Dunstan, for all your help. I really do appreciate it.
You're very welcome. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact me. You know my number, right?
I sure do. Thanks very much.
Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Hello, Clark's Cycle Hire. My name's Keith. How can I help you?
Oh, hello. I saw your ad in the local paper, and as I'm thinking of doing some cycling, I'm wondering what kinds of bike you have and what your prices are like.
Well, we hire out two main types of machine, touring and mountain bikes. Are you likely to be riding off-road, do you think?
No, I'll probably be sticking to roads and country lanes, so a touring bike would be best, I think.
Right, well, the rate will be £50 for a week or £14 per day.
So it's a lot cheaper to rent by the week.
Yes, definitely. Though it's important to bring the bike back on time. Otherwise, I'm afraid we have to charge a late return fee.
And how much is that?
For each additional hour, it's £1.25.
So if you were a day late, it would cost another £30.
Yes, that's right.
I'd make sure I didn't do that then.
I should also point out there's a deposit which you get back when you return the bicycle. In good condition, of course. On touring models, it's £60.
Is there anything else I'd have to pay?
No, that's it. Though if you're planning to ride fairly long distances, you might like to have one or two accessories.
Such as?
Well, for another £5, we can supply lightweight bags, either panniers or the handlebar sort. It's amazing how much they can carry, and the way they're designed means they don't get in the way when you're riding.
Well, I'll see. But what about essential things like a pump and a repair kit? I wouldn't have to pay extra for those, would I?
No, there's no charge for things like that. Or for a lock. It's a good strong one, too. Just make sure you don't lose the key.
That reminds me, what about insurance? What happens if someone steals the bike, in spite of the wonderful lock?
Didn't I mention that? Oh, I should have told you that's included in the rental too.
And it covers everything, does it?
It covers you against theft of the bike, yes, as long as it's securely locked at the time. You'd have to pay part of any individual claim, though.
How much?
If the bike was stolen and not recovered, you'd be liable for the first £100.
So, if I do go ahead and rent one, how do I pay? By cheque or would it have to be cash?
Neither, I'm afraid. We can only accept credit card bookings. Otherwise, we'd have to ask our customers for the full value of the machine as a deposit.
I've got a Visa in my name. Would that be okay?
Sure.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
So if I want to have a look at the bikes, how do I find you? I live near the university, by the way.
Right. First you take Woods Road as far as the main police station.
I know it. It's right next to the park.
Yes, that's it. And after the police station, there's a turning to the right called Oak Street.
At the big supermarket?
No, it's before then. It's actually between the police station and a garage on the other side.
OK.
So, you go down Oak Street until you reach the health centre on the right. If you get to a pub called the Maple Leaf, you've gone too far. All right?
Yes, I've got that.
Now, opposite the health centre, there's a pharmacy, and we're just behind that.
OK, fine. I'll try to call over sometime tomorrow.
Great. See you then.
Bye.
That is the end of Part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 3. Part 3.
You'll hear an interview on job application.
First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
These days it's hard enough to find a suitable job, let alone get as far as an interview. Dozens of people every day send off their curriculum vitae or application form and wait hopefully to be summoned for an interview. Now this, apparently, is where a lot of people fall down because of their inadequacy at completing their application forms, according to Judith Davidson, author of Getting a Job, a popular book which has recently come onto the market. Our reporter Christopher Shields decided to look into this apparent inability of the British to sell themselves, and he spoke to Judith Davidson about it. Judith Davidson lectures at a management training college for young men and women, most of whom have just graduated from university and gone there to take a crash course in management techniques. One of the hardest things is not passing the exams, not passing the course examinations successfully, but actually finding employment afterwards. So Judith now concentrates on helping trainees to set about doing just this. And she tries to work out the reasons why chances of getting a job are pretty small.
Very often, a job application or a curriculum vitae will contain basic grammatical or careless spelling mistakes, even from university graduates. Then those that do get as far as an interview become inarticulate or clumsy when they try to talk about themselves. It doesn't matter how highly qualified or brilliant you may be, if you come across as tongue-tied and gauche, your chances are quite slim.
What are other problems of the application forms?
Some letters are dirty and untidily written, with finger marks all over them and ink blots or even coffee stains. Others arrive on lined or flowered or sometimes scented paper, none of which is likely to make a good impression on the average business-like boss.
Many people are unable to make that initial impact with an employer. In fact, it needs techniques to send an application which will stand out from the rest and persuade the employer you're the right one for the job. This prompted an enterprising young man called Mark Ashworth, a recruitment consultant himself, to start writing job applications for other people for a fee.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
He told me he got the idea in America, where it's already big business, and in the last few months alone he's written over 35 CVs. He feels that 80% of job applications received by personnel managers are inadequate in some way.
Well, yes, many people simply can't cope with grammar and spelling and don't know what to put in or leave out. Sometimes people condense their work experience so much that a future employer doesn't know enough about him. Then, on the other hand, some people go too far the other way. To give you an example, one CV I once received in my recruiting role was getting on for 30 pages long.
Mark has an initial interview with all his clients in which he tries to make them think about their motivation. He can often exploit these experiences in the CV he writes for them and shows that they have been valuable preparation for the job now sought. He also believes that well-prepared job history and a good letter of application are absolutely essential.
Among the most important aspects of applications are spelling, correct grammar, content, and layout. A new boss will probably also be impressed with a good reference or a letter of commendation written by a former employer. The type of CV I aim to produce depends largely on the kind of job being applied for. They don't always have to be slick or highly sophisticated, but in certain cases this does help.
Judith Davidson thought very much along the same lines as Mark. In her opinion, one of the most important aspects of job applications was that they should be easy to read.
Many applicants send in letters and forms which are virtually unreadable. The essence of handwritten application is that they should be neat, legible, and the spelling should be accurate. I stress handwritten because most employers want a sample of their future employees' writing. Many believe this gives some indication of the character of the person who wrote it. Some people forget vital things like putting their own address or the date. Others fail to do what's required of them by a job advertisement.
Judith believes that job seekers should always send an accompanying letter along with their application forms, stating clearly why their qualifications make them suitable for the vacancy.
Personal details have no place in letters of application. I well remember hearing about one such letter which stated, quite bluntly, "I need more money to pay for my flat." No boss would be impressed by such directness.
She added that the art of applying for jobs successfully was having to be learnt by more and more people these days, with the current unemployment situation. With as many as 200 or 300 people applying for one vacancy, a boss would want to see only a small fraction of that number in person for an interview. So your application had to really outshine all the others to get you on the shortlist.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about architecture. You have 30 seconds to look at questions 31 to 36.
During today's seminar, we will be looking at English Gothic architecture and its origins with a specific case study of Wells Cathedral in England. The Gothic style was initially brought over to England from France. This was at a period of time in which England was ruled from France by the Normans, starting with William the Conqueror, who first defeated the English army at the Battle of Hastings on October 14th, 1066. After 1072, when some smaller rebellions in northern England had been defeated, the Normans gained complete control of the English monarchy, which they controlled until 1154. The peace that ensued in England had a large impact on many aspects of daily life. Thousands of French words entered the English language for the first time, such as beef, fruit, city, and hour. French ideas and styles, like Gothic, also began to flow across the Channel to England too, examples of which can still be seen in the architecture of many listed buildings. A listed building is one that is protected from alteration or demolition because of its historical or stylistic importance. One such building is Wells Cathedral. Construction on Wells Cathedral began in 1175, at a time when Gothic architecture as a style was in its infancy. As a result, it is one of the first entirely Gothic buildings ever constructed. From the first design to the date it was completed in 1490, Gothic architecture flourished in England. Therefore, later additions to the building were still influenced by this Gothic style, rather than by later architectural styles such as Tudor architecture. Older cathedrals in England would have initially been influenced by Romanesque architecture, alternatively known as Norman architecture in England. As the former name suggests, Romanesque was a building style based on the skills passed on to various areas of Europe by the Romans. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, these methods were retained by Rome's former colonies and developed further. One such Roman gift to the Romanesque architects was the round arch, also known as the true arch. The Romans perfected this style by using wedge-shaped stones called voussoirs, which created pressure that held the structure together at the top. Cathedrals in England, such as the ones in Ely and Canterbury, were started before the arrival of Gothic architecture. Even though parts of those two cathedrals, which were constructed later, are in the Gothic style, other sections predating the arrival of Gothic architecture are Romanesque. The result is known as eclectic, because the building is constructed using more than one style. All of these cathedrals belong to a group known as the medieval cathedrals of England. There are 26 different buildings that belong to this group in total, all of which were constructed or added to during a 500-year period from 1040 to 1540. The transition from Romanesque to Gothic began in 1144 at the Abbey Church of Saint-Denis on the edge of Paris. It was here that a Benedictine abbot by the name of Suger had just completed his plan to rebuild the Basilica of Saint-Denis in a new style through which he believed the dull mind rises to truth through that which is material. This refers to one architectural feature in particular: high, rib-vault ceilings, which created much more space inside the cathedral and were designed to draw the attention of people up towards heaven. This design feature also allowed whole walls of the cathedral to be transformed by colourful stained glass. Work started on Wells Cathedral soon afterwards, greatly inspired by Abbot Suger's work. Planned in the crucifix style with the head pointing east and foot pointing west, the cathedral is 126 metres long and the nave is 20 metres high. This is quite low compared to some of the bigger cathedrals elsewhere. Use of tracery, lancet windows and mullions are all characteristic of English Gothic architecture. Whilst examples of all three of these architectural elements can be found at Wells, the lancet windows have no tracery at all, which was more common in early English Gothic architecture before advances were made in the use of mullions and tracery with glass. Lancet windows are tall, thin windows with a pointed arch at the top, and are so named because they resemble the weapon often carried by a soldier called a lance. Examples of these lancet windows can be seen on the west front of the cathedral, which is the most celebrated for its life-size sculptures and delicate floral carvings. Inside the pinnacle-topped gable is a sculpture of Christ the Judge. Immediately below him, sculptures of the 12 apostles peer out over the small city of Wells. Below the apostles are 9 archangels, which are half-size sculptures. At one time, all of these, along with the decorative carvings, would have been painted and gilded. However, today, all the paint has worn away and the sculptures are the colour of the oolite sedimentary stone used to construct the cathedral. It is remarkable to think that more than 800 years ago, such magnificent buildings were created without the use of large cranes and modern technology. It would have taken much longer, but it is possible to see the high level of craftsmanship and attention to detail that is less common in the modern day.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
You and a friend are looking for a place to live. You have a list of places and go to see a rental agent to check on a number of points. Listen to the conversation between your friend and the rental agent and complete the list.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 7.
Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hi, we've been looking over your listing of apartments for rent and we have a few questions about a couple of the apartments. Can you help us?
Sure. Yep, this is our most recent listing. What would you like to know?
Well, we were first wondering about the house on 3rd Street. We can see that it is furnished and rents for $135 a week, but can you tell us how many bedrooms it has?
Let's see. In addition to the den, it has 3 bedrooms.
What about the one on Route 9N? It looks like it's big with a library and a deck, but it doesn't say how much it costs or anything else about it.
Oh yes, Mrs. Gaylor's apartment. That one is actually only a 10-month rental, and it is going for $156 per week. It's quite a nice place. She only rents for 10 months each year because of horse racing season. Then her relatives all come to stay, so tenants have to move out. It's a little bit inconvenient, but past tenants have really enjoyed their stay there.
Oh, well, we need it for a full year. I guess that one is out. How about the rental on Browen Drive? How many rooms does that one have?
As it says on the list, it has 2 bedrooms and a private kitchen and bath. But it's actually a very small place. That's why it's a bit cheaper.
Oh. Well then, what about the one that has 3 large rooms? Who is renting that property?
That one is a good deal. Mr. John Smith is renting it. But he's quite eccentric and he has a strict rule about no pets.
How about cats?
Nope, absolutely no pets.
Well then, how about this studio apartment rented by Mr. Bo Jensen? How is that one?
That ad is actually a bit deceptive. The studio apartment is the whole upper floor of an older house. It's actually very large and, at $45 a week, quite affordable. And it's near campus.
I think I'd like to check that one out. Do you have a telephone number that we can call?
It's not on the list? Oh, it isn't. Here it is. You should ring area code 518 and then 543-7790.
Thanks. I think I'll call on that one first.
Your friend decides that he would like to talk to Mr. Bo Jensen.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 8 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 8 to 10.
Hello? 1512, Route 9.
Yes, is this Mr. Jensen?
Yes, it is. Can I help you?
Yeah, we're studying here at university and we came across the rental information for the studio apartment that you are renting. Is it still available?
Yes, of course. I actually just placed the ad and you're the first person to call. Is there anything you'd like to know about it?
Yes, actually there is. As students, we are on the internet a lot, and we heard that some homes in the area have high-speed connections. What type of connection do you have there now?
Oh, that's an interesting first question. But I guess I have heard that too. But we just have a phone line here. Nothing fancy. I think you can have a cable line installed, but it's just a phone line for now.
Okay, well maybe we can do that. What type of heating does the apartment have?
Now there's a more traditional question. We have oil heat here. It's an older house.
That tends to be a little more expensive during the winter, right?
Yeah, but there's nothing to do about it. It would cost too much for me to put in a gas heater. What else would you like to know about the apartment?
Well, we heard it was quite big. Is it furnished?
Actually, yes. I should have put that in the ad. It has an old couch and a couple chairs, a dining table, refrigerator, stove, and even a dishwasher.
Does it have any beds?
Yep, it has 2.
That sounds great. When is the apartment available?
You can have it tomorrow night if you want. I just have to clean up a couple things before you get here. Do you want to come over and see it first?
No, it sounds fine to us. I actually know the street too, so I know the area. We'll take it.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2. Part 2.
First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now, listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
So, Enrique, have you started your research project on cities yet?
I've done a bit of reading around the topic and made a few notes. But, if I'm honest about it, I really haven't done as much as I'd have liked to because I'm finding it a bit difficult.
You don't know how relieved I am to hear you say that. I feel the same way. I think the key is to be able to make valid research questions.
You're probably right about that. Didn't we have some lectures on how to write research questions? I think it was towards the beginning of the term.
Yes, we did. I've got my notes somewhere in this file. I tell you what, why don't we look at the notes together and then try and come up with some research questions? At least that would be a good starting point. Give us some sense of where we're going with this.
Brilliant idea. Let's get started. Okay. From what I remember, a good research question is all about knowing from the outset what it is you're trying to find out.
Yes. And now that I'm looking at my notes again, I see I've written here that it's to do with understanding and evaluation. So, understanding a particular issue and evaluating any problems around it. And of course, a very important part is not overlooking any research that has already been done. Past research is just as important as what is being done now.
It's a bit, I suppose, like looking at the research that's already been done and seeing if it agrees or disagrees with your own ideas.
Sure, I hear what you're saying. But to do that properly, you have to have a clear idea in your head what your own research question is. And by that, I mean specific areas you want to focus on. Let's face it, there's so much information out there, and we can't possibly include it all in 2,000 words.
Don't remind me. The thought of writing 2,000 words at the moment seems like a huge mountain to climb.
I know, but let's try to make a start. I think we're meant to be identifying what makes a successful city, and also try to explain why there has been such a steady population movement of people from rural to urban areas. But I'm a bit confused because I don't think this is meant to be the main focus of our research.
Perhaps that's why the lecturer said we need to write questions, and that must be our starting point.
Okay, well, what we're investigating is more than simply what elements make a city successful, but we're also trying to offer possible explanations. So, we have 2 questions. Why do people want to move to cities? And why do people choose to live in them?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Okay then. I think the first issue concerning successful cities must be the economy. People move to cities for better job prospects, and successful cities are cities that have thriving economies.
That's true enough. It does mean that cities can offer good job opportunities, which seems to me to suggest that a city will only be successful if it attracts the right kind of people to work there.
What kind of person are you talking about?
Well, I suppose I'm referring to the skilled labor force. You know, the idea that up-and-coming young people will move to cities, settle there, maybe buy property, and so that city will get the most talented creative minds. But if a city doesn't offer this, then obviously it will lose out, as university leavers will choose elsewhere.
You could be right there. But I also think that when cities encourage businesses to develop, then you obviously have money pouring into the city, which can raise the general standard of living.
So we've definitely got a question worth investigating. But apart from the economic factor, I think another point worth mentioning is the environment.
Sure, we can research areas like the quality of the air, how clean it is, and then there's traffic. Is there too much traffic? How is it controlled? And also the issues of noise pollution and how the city manages its waste. Oh, and I nearly forgot. The environment includes green spaces like parks.
Those are all valid points, but I think you've overlooked the whole issue of beauty.
Beauty? Are you sure? What's beauty got to do with the environment?
Well, don't you think if you were deciding whether or not you would live in a city, your first impressions would be made with your eyes? So, the buildings in a city are really important. If the entire city looks like a concrete jungle, then it's unlikely to make people want to live there, is it? I think successful cities are those which have managed to strike a balance between old buildings and new ones. So Of course, you'd have some buildings reflecting more modern architecture, but others that haven't lost their character and still represent the past.
You're right, actually. I've often thought that buildings tell a story. I mean, you can tell the history of a place by looking at the buildings.
I know exactly what you mean. And let's not forget that the environment includes cultural aspects. So, for example, what's the cultural life like? For me, a successful city will be attractive because it will have lots to offer, like a good nightlife and a wide variety of places to visit in the day, like museums and galleries, places like that.
True, true. My own view is that some cities have an energy about them. They're exciting to be in.
And other cities are the opposite. Well, we've covered so much ground here. But I think there's one final aspect we should research.
What's that then?
The social aspect. Because, let's face it, cities are made up of people.
They are. And surely a successful city would be one where there is a sense of community, a place where people would feel safe and want to raise families in.
This topic is limitless.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear a tutor and some students talking about an assignment. Listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Come in. Sit down. Good to see you.
Hello.
Hello.
Now, this assignment. The best thing we can do, I think, is to think how we can approach it. The main point is to investigate television, but not what's happened in the past.
I was thinking that it would be necessary to go over the new media first and then...
Yes, that's a way to make a start, but you need to do that quite briefly.
But it's quite a complex topic.
Yeah, I agree, but the emphasis must be on the future development of television as a cultural phenomenon.
Yes. I've been reading the talk by Ashley Highfield.
All right, and what do you take from that? What are the things that are competing with television?
Well, to start with, there is the games console. Then there is the personal computer and the internet. Then again, the mobile phone with its capability of games and puzzles. And, of course, internet access. Lastly, there is the iPod with the possibility of listening to music wherever you go.
Good. You've understood that. Now, which of these presents the greatest competition for television?
Well, according to the research, it's video games.
Yes, that's true at present. But in the future...
I think the phone will present the greatest threat then.
And why? Because it's mobile, portable, and it's developing fast. Yeah, I think you're right. You need always to look to the future and try to assess how things will develop, as we said. Good. Now, you need to move on to the new social trends in connection with television.
Is one of them the idea that programmes might become shorter and shorter?
Ah, yes. The average programme might be 10 minutes.
Or even less. Just mini-programmes, say 4 to 5 minutes long. Now, do you think you can get access to all the materials you need?
The problem at the moment is the library.
Oh, yes. What's happening there?
There's a tremendous amount of noise because of the new extension they are building. It's quite impossible to work there.
They are stopping work for a week next week, I believe, and then all the sections will be open. There's a hold-up because some roof tiles have not arrived, so there'll be peace for that week.
But then after that, the media studies section will be closed for a week and all the noise and dirt will start up again.
Yes, the sociology section will be open, and there's some good stuff there for you on this topic, and it's further away from the noise.
Yes, I don't think the sociology section is affected at all, and neither is the journal section.
No, obviously they're rotating the closures, and it was sociology's turn to close for a week last term.
I think we should make a complaint.
Yeah, I think you should.
I've had a word with the library staff. They are very sympathetic, but...
They are affected by these works just as we are.
If I were you, I'd make a complaint directly to the premises committee. They only meet once a year, but in fact I know they're having a meeting next Tuesday. You might like to make contact with them, but don't say that I suggested this.
Yes. But the Students' Union might be better since they are independent of the university.
That's true, but I can't imagine that people haven't already approached them about this. Let's try the premises committee.
Good idea. Why not?
OK.
Now, don't forget I need a copy of your dissertations by email and 2 copies in print, that is, on paper. If you give the reprographics office 24 hours' notice, they'll make copies for you. And if you give them my details, they'll send those copies directly to me. They won't send copies to you, so you'll need to take your own copy personally from them. Good. Any questions?
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
Now answer questions 27 to 30.
One little thing was just that I wondered whether we should actually talk about that famous website. You know the one, YouTube.
I was rather hoping you hadn't overlooked that. Good point. It's mostly homemade videos. I suppose you could say that each video is a television version of a podcast. Anything else?
Yes, I've got a question, I'm afraid. I'm not completely clear about the exact meaning of culture, as we are using it in this subject.
Well, Mrs. Jones is giving a lecture on culture and society in the University Theatre. It's on Wednesday at 10 a.m, and you can learn all about it there, I'm sure.
Can you give us that again, please?
Yes, that's Culture and Society. It's in the University Theatre, and let me just check the time. Yes, here it is, 10 a.m. on Wednesday. She'll be giving a very thorough discussion of the issues in defining what culture means.
Right. That's good. The thing is, the reading list confused me a bit. One thing that occurred to me was that it might be broken down into subsections for future students.
Yes, that's a fair point. I'll bear that in mind. Now, don't forget, you need to do the reading and finish the assignment by the 4th of July. Is that okay?
Fine. Thank you very much.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
You will hear part of a lecture about the school calendar. Listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So, having seen that the six-term system has passed the test of cost-effectiveness, we can move on to the educational aspects of this arrangement. Firstly, all the terms would be approximately the same length. Instead of terms up to 13 weeks, which we have now, there could be a repeating pattern of 7 weeks of term time plus 2 weeks of vacation. This would be repeated 6 times per year. How does this affect the effectiveness of the educational provision? The most noticeable result would be that the very long summer holiday would be reduced in length. This byproduct of the six-term system could be beneficial. There's plenty of evidence of huge learning loss by pupils during the summer holidays. By learning loss, we mean the amount that pupils forget or lose during a holiday break. Ashley carried out a number of analyses which showed this conclusively. He investigated 39 studies examining the effects of summer holidays on standardized test scores. His analyses indicated that summer learning loss equaled 2 weeks to 7 weeks of instruction. On average, children's test scores were 3 weeks lower than when they left school in the previous term. He also found differences in the learning loss effect according to subject. The subjects he analysed were reading, writing and maths, and he found that the effect was greatest in maths and reading. Furthermore, although all social groups experienced roughly similar learning loss in the field of maths, the studies found that disadvantaged children showed even greater losses in reading skills. So, the problem of learning loss in traditional schools is clear. However, the results of studies into the six-term system and learning loss are ambiguous. Marchmont found that pupils in six-term schools maintained their test scores after the shorter holiday period. This is certainly an improvement on the traditional system where, as we have seen, pupils perform worse after the summer break. Benson, however, found no differences between those in traditional schools and on the six-term schedule. It would seem reasonable that if long holidays result in learning loss, then shorter holidays should result in less learning loss. So we await the outcome of further studies. Historically, of course, everyone knows the reason for our system of 3 terms per year. In days when agriculture was of much greater importance in our working lives, it was essential that the children helped with the harvest. Later on, this changed, and more people moved into the towns. But then there was a new problem. Before air conditioning, it was very impractical to try to teach children in the summer months. Nowadays, that's no longer a barrier. One way of providing something different is the summer school. Here, there is a completely different kind of educational provision. Cooper and others investigated 93 summer schools and the results they achieved. They all had a positive effect on learning. Most summer schools, of course, have small classes, and class size was shown to have a positive effect. Additionally, summer school children usually benefit from a great deal of parental support, not least because payment of fees is involved, and this, as so often, was shown to produce very good outcomes. Results were most impressive, in maths in general.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Finding life alone